Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It is Rob Shmuel Ben Yehoshua. It is I, Rabbi Stephen, Rashbi in the house with this week's Devar Torah. So you all know what I'm going to mention. I'm going to talk about the wonderful Shabbat Across America that we just had. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you for the wondrous food. And of course, thank you to my wife, the wonderful Rebbetzin Rachel Bat Avraham, Chris. Wonderful job organizing, getting everything together, commanding the setup. And, you know, it was because of her. I know she's my wife. Yes, I'm prejudiced. But you know what? She did such a wonderful job organizing, getting it together, getting you all to come out. And it was just a wonderful, beautiful experience. Thank you to the National Jewish Outreach Program. It is their mission to bring us all back into the synagogue and bring us back to Judaism, to maybe a different, not a different kind of Judaism, but, you know, balancing out the halacha and the ritual with all the beauty that's inherent in this wonderful philosophy. And we did a wonderful service. There was we had the prayers, we had explanations, we had an interaction. You had some great questions. It was beautiful. And, you know, was sort of a little concerned that the previous week we did our family Shabbat, when we also do our potluck and people brought food. We're thinking, you know, are people going to want to do this again? And you did, because it's such a wonderful family type atmosphere where we're all together and we're all eating together and breaking bread together. And, you know, if it were up to me, I'd do that every week. But, well, maybe down the road. So, thank you again also for John Paul on his, and I have... What was it, John Paul? Was it a balalaika? Was it a baklava? I don't know. That long, thin-necked, what is it, 4-string instrument, guitar-like thing. And Sasha, you accompanied us, and you're coming along too. And Alana, of course, you know, your violin playing. You know, and people are coming, and Jack comes up with his guitar, and you know, you're all participating. It really is taking a village, you know, and it's so wonderful to see us coming together as a community, and we're going to keep doing that. So, all right, let's talk about this week's Devar Torah. So this week, Pekudei concludes the book of Exodus. And it's really kind of, again, continuing what the previous portion talked about as well. You know, Pekudei, the fact that, Pekudei is this week's portion, and it's continuing the discussion of the building of the tabernacle. So we just had, you know, last few portions, Moshe Rabbeinu got the commandments from Hashem to build the tabernacle, and today in class we figured out it was that the tabernacle was about 300 feet by 90 feet, you know, depending on what an amos is. An amot, cubit is the length from the middle finger down to the elbow. You know, it comes up to about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, somewhere around there. You figure people back then were about 5'2", 5'3", so, you know, maybe it was more like 1.5 feet. So it's about, we figure the tabernacle is about maybe 3 times the size of our sanctuary. Interesting. And it talks about how Belzalel, who was the craftsman, the general contractor that had everybody make the planks and the different sockets and the things that put it together, and it was Aholiab from the tribe of Dan who was the one that did a lot of the weaving, you know, the curtains, the outside covering, and that type of thing. So it's interesting. This portion concludes the book of Exodus. So we talk about the Torah as the 5 books of Moses. When you really think about it, Moshe Rabbeinu is really only in 4, and Exodus is the first book that introduces him. So for myself, in exploring the homage, I've always had kind of maybe a challenge. Let's call it a challenge, and reconcile who this man Moshe really was. Because when we first encounter him, he leaves Egypt. He becomes a shepherd. He settles into a very quiet life in Midian. He follows one of his calves up to the mountain, and he sees the burning bush, and he hears first an angel, then the voice of Hashem, who is charging him with going back to Egypt. I've heard the complaints, the cries of my Israelite children, and I'm going to go ahead and fulfill my promise to the patriarchs to bring them back to Canaan and establish a homeland and a holy land, etc., etc. So we see how Moses was sort of this reluctant prophet, if you will. Yet the sages call him the greatest prophet, even at the end of the Chumash, the end of Deuteronomy, the greatest of the prophets that ever lived, that talked to Hashem the way you and I would have a conversation. Whereas other prophets, it's usually a vision. They have a vision when they're asleep, something like Joseph. What did he do? He interpreted dreams. Okay, so Jacob, right? Hashem came to him in a dream when he's wrestling the angel. But there's Moses having a conversation like they were getting together for coffee. And Moshe Rabbeinu had all these getting used to being a prophet. Let's face it. Here he is, and he's telling God, well, these people are going to listen to me. He goes off. He tells Pharaoh, let his people go. And Pharaoh says, well, now they're going to, make the bricks without the straw. And Moses goes back to Hashem, and he's like, now what did I do? What am I going to do? And he's arguing. He doesn't want to do it, or he doesn't think he's up to the task. I can't speak. Well, we'll have Aaron. Then he gets these people, takes them across the Sea of Reeds. They see that the Egyptians were drowned in the Sea of Reeds, and now they're on their way. And what's the first thing they do? Where's water? What are we going to do for water? And Moses is like, okay, we've got this tree. I'm going to throw it in the river. You're going to have sweet water. All right, well, now what? Now we want meat. One thing after another, and yet Moses stayed the course. We then encounter Moses adjudicating everybody's legal issues. He's got this whole line, and it was really Jethro to come and say, why don't you delegate instead of you having to do all this? Moses took it on himself. Moses is up on top of Mount Sinai, and Hashem is saying, those people that you brought out of it, Moses is like, when did they become my people? Well, they were. Moses never argued with Hashem. He just, as he got more and more involved, more and more became the leader. He rose to the challenge. And when the people were were building the golden calf, and God said, I'm just going to destroy him. I'm going to make you a great nation. And Moses is pleading with him. The same way Abraham pleaded with Hashem to spare the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He's like, well, if you do that, he's bargaining. He's being the judge advocate. He's being, where Hashem is the prosecutor, Moses is, the defending the people of Israel. He said, well, then people think you brought him out here just to kill him. And then with Korah, okay, what did he do? When Korah's rebellion, did he say, you know what? You want them? They're yours. You want to take these people? Hey, I'm going back to Midian with my wife and kids. We're going to just live a nice, friendly, relaxed life as a shepherd. They're all yours, Korah. He didn't do that because he knew he had a responsibility. He was going to lead them to the promised land. So what did he do? He said they did the thing with the fire pans, and even when the ground opened up, Moses still pleaded for them. He pleaded for the survivors. And Moses was always being demeaned. It was one thing or another. It wasn't like we want water, we want meat. It was like, oh, you brought us out into this desert, to die of thirst, to starve. The flesh pots that we had, we were nice and full. We had our fill back in Egypt. I mean, like, gosh, are you nuts? And even so, even with all this, even when he was trying to help the people, again, he had the rebellion. We had all these rebellions. He was always dealing with something coming between the people and Hashem, even when people were demeaning him. What did Korach say? Oh, why does Aaron get to be the high priest? Because he's Moses' brother. Nepotism. Let's see who really should be it. Right? Even his brother and his sister got into the act, saying, well, you're out here and you're leaving your wife and your kids. Poor guy. And I think as we delve into this man's heart, who he really was, how he developed, how he matured. He lived 120 years, and the last 40 years of his life. I mean, think about it. They don't talk about this much in the homage, but after the incident of the spies, he's got to deal with these people for another 38 years. And I'm sure they weren't very happy that they knew they were going to be out there dying in the wilderness. But he rose to the challenge, and he still took care of them. Saturday morning, in Pesukei de Zimra, the second part of our service, hymns of praise, we insert Psalm 90. Now, we've talked about how the Psalms from 90 to 100, King David was down in the catacombs. He found what he saw with some writings by Moshe, turned them into those 11 Psalms. And Psalm 90 is inserted, especially into Shabbat, Tefillah for Moshe Ish HaElohim, a prayer of Moses, a man of God. And he really, really was. He was so loyal. Even when Hashem said, you struck the rock when I told you just to talk to it, so you're not going into the promised land. He still remained loyal to him for 38 years. I've gained for me personally, I've gained such an appreciation for this man and why he is our greatest prophet. And we all have a lot to learn from him. The patience, the humanity, the taking care of people, even when he knew they were going down the wrong path. He did what he had to do, what he could do to steer them right. And I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to turn this into a sermon, but think about Moses. Now, next week, this Friday, I will not be there. I will not be doing the services. The following week, March, I believe it's the 15th or 16th, we'll have a family service. The week after that, we'll have Purim. So we'll have a regular service the last weekend of March, and then we go right into Passover. So, hope you're enjoying these. A little bit longer than usual. Thank you again for Shabbat Across America. We'll try to have some more programs for that to you. Shabbat Shalom. See you in synagogue.